Wednesday the 27th, and we are in Mark 14:32 to 42. And in this passage we see Jesus and his disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's late in the evening, probably the early hours of the morning, and so everyone is tired and weary, both Jesus and his disciples. And Jesus is fully aware of how the next few days are going to play out for him, for his life, of what lies ahead of him. He knows that he's going to be betrayed by Judas. We'll read that in tomorrow's reading. He's going to be abandoned by his disciples. Peter will deny him. He's going to be arrested and falsely accused by the religious authorities. He knows that he's going to be whipped to within an inch of his life, beaten by the Romans. And Jesus knows ultimately that he will face the agony and the torture of a crucifixion, death on the cross. And so what does Jesus do? He heads out of Jerusalem. He heads down from Jerusalem across the Kidron Valley and back up into a garden area called Gethsemane. And I think there are some real keys for us in this passage at this time about how we navigate times of pain and hardship, how we navigate emotions of distress and trouble that Jesus experienced in this passage. And the first thing is that Jesus invites his friends into that moment, his spiritual family. He allows them to see his pain. He was honest and vulnerable with them. And he retreated a little bit further alone with the Father. That's important too. But I'd really encourage you at times of pain, don't isolate yourself. Be honest and vulnerable with those in your spiritual family. The second thing is that Jesus took that pain, that distress to the Father. He turned his emotional anguish into prayer. And I believe that we always have a choice in times like that, in times of pain. A choice of, will we journey deeper into God at that time, or will we walk away from him? And Jesus was honest and vulnerable with his disciples, but he was honest and vulnerable with his heavenly Father in a place of prayer. And the interesting thing is that Jesus got no answer as far as we know. He asked the Father for another way out. If there's another way, let it be possible. Perhaps the only unanswered prayer that Jesus ever prayed. He went back to his Father 3 times in prayer. He waited in that place of pain. But then, of course, came the words, enough. Jesus announced enough was enough. And he was led out of that garden, out of that moment. So for Jesus, Gethsemane was a place of preparation, a place of surrender, a place of submission, a place of yielding and aligning his will with the will of the Father. And perhaps you, like I, have been experiencing a bit of that during this time of lockdown, a submission of our will to align with the will of the Father. That word Gethsemane, it literally means olive press, to press olives. Now, last week I should have been there in Jerusalem on that garden hill, looking out over the city surrounded by olive trees. And so not being there with the team and with my son was a time of mourning, of distress, really. And if I open my Bible to Isaiah chapter 53, that famous passage on the suffering servant, there in my Bible is a little olive flower, a dried olive flower that floated down the last time I was at the garden reading this passage. Let me read to you verse 4 and 5. It says, surely he took our infirmities and carried our sorrows. And yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. Jesus was crushed for us. That word crushed in Hebrew, it means pounded like olives in the press. And you know, when you pound olives in the press, you release their oil. And when we draw close to God at times of pain, that is when the healing oil starts to flow. In the ancient world, oil was a healing balm. Oil provided light for lamps. It anointed for a purpose. It spoke of life. In the Old Testament, the temple stuff that belonged to God was anointed with oil. It signified that it was his, it belonged to him. And so this day, as you draw close to the Father, I pray that you will know the oil of his presence flowing in your life, bringing light, bringing healing, bringing life, and showing that you belong to him.